I never imagined my 6 years at Veritech would end like this. Standing awkwardly at my own farewell coffee, watching colleagues avoid eye contact. Madison, the founder's daughter, arrived 30 minutes late, platinum blonde hair perfectly styled, designer heels clicking against hardwood. She pointed dismissively at a tray of untouched pastries. "Be useful," she commanded. While carrying the tray, my security fob slipped from my pocket. The company counsel, Jackson, bent to retrieve it. His expression shifted as he examined the tiny black device. "Whose hardware signer is this? And why does her name unlock our license vault?" Madison's face drained of color. 6 years earlier, I had joined Veritech with nothing but optimism and a computer science degree from a state university. The company was tiny then, just 20 employees working out of a renovated warehouse in the industrial district. Thomas Wright, the founder, interviewed me personally. Unlike most tech founders with their rehearsed speeches about changing the world, Thomas was refreshingly honest. "Lila, we're building enterprise software that nobody will ever see on a billboard," he told me, blue eyes crinkling at the corners. "But our platform will help thousands of businesses work smarter. I need someone who cares about the code, not just the stock options." I was sold. That first year, we all worked ridiculous hours. I coded until my vision blurred, sustained by pizza deliveries and the genuine camaraderie that forms when a small group is united by a common goal. My tiny apartment sat empty while I practically lived at the office, building our proprietary platform module by module. Thomas noticed. He started seeking me out for coffee breaks, picking my brain about feature implementations and security protocols. Despite being 20 years my senior, he never talked down to me or mansplained technology. When I proposed developing a better licensing system to prevent unauthorized usage, he gave me the green light immediately. "Security is where most startups cut corners," he said. "I want us to be different." I poured everything into that licensing system. While other engineers focused on flashy features, I obsessed over creating an unbreakable architecture. The result was a hardware-based authentication system using physical security fobs tied to individual administrator identities. Each fob contained a unique cryptographic key that, when combined with the right password, provided secure access to our most sensitive systems. The day we implemented it, Thomas handed me a special black fob. "This is an administrator signer," he explained. "Only 4 exist. Mine, yours, one for Ryan in security, and one in the company vault. These can authorize changes to the entire system." Those early days weren't just about work. I made real friends. Amber from legal became my confidant, always ready with sharp insights and sharper wit. Ryan from security was my technical sounding board, constantly challenging my security protocols until they were bulletproof. As we grew, Thomas insisted on maintaining the culture. When we hit 50 employees, he still knew everyone's name. At 100, he still brought donuts on Fridays. The company expanded to a proper office building downtown, and my salary quadrupled from my starting pay. Then came the Series C funding round. Suddenly, we had 200 employees, many hired from larger tech companies with significantly higher salaries than the original team. New executives appeared with impressive resumes and PowerPoint presentations about scaling strategies and market penetration. Thomas started missing our coffee breaks. Board meetings consumed his calendar. When we did talk, he seemed tired, the enthusiasm in his eyes dimmed by endless investor presentations and growth projections. "Just temporary growing pains," he assured me when I expressed concern. "Once we stabilize, things will calm down." I believed him. Until one Monday morning, when the entire company gathered in the atrium for an emergency announcement. Our CFO stood on the stairs, voice cracking as he informed us that Thomas had suffered a massive heart attack over the weekend. He hadn't survived. The funeral was packed with tech industry figures, many of whom I suspected had never actually spoken to Thomas. I sat with the original team members, all of us shell-shocked and uncertain about the future. 2 weeks later, we got our answer. Madison Wright, Thomas's 27-year-old daughter, called an all-hands meeting. With her business school degree and zero technical experience, she announced she would be taking her father's place as the majority shareholder. "My father built something incredible," she told the silent room, her voice lacking the warmth that had defined Thomas. "But to honor his legacy, we need to take Veritech to the next level." Standing beside her was Ethan Morris, whom she introduced as our new CEO. His $1,000 suit and practiced smile did nothing to ease the knot forming in my stomach. "Thomas Wright was a visionary," Ethan proclaimed. "But visionaries need executors to fully realize their dreams." As they outlined their plans for aggressive expansion and a potential IPO, I glanced around at my colleagues' faces. Some looked excited by the promises of growth and higher valuations. Others, mostly early employees, shared my unease. None of us could have predicted just how quickly everything would change. The transformation began subtly. Madison and Ethan introduced culture enhancement initiatives with mandatory meetings about aligning with our new direction. The comfortable workspace Thomas had designed was renovated into something that resembled a luxury hotel lobby, complete with a reception desk staffed by 2 former models. My team was relocated from our convenient second-floor space to a cramped area in the basement, ostensibly because we needed enhanced security for our work. Our regular Friday team lunches were canceled due to budget optimization, despite the company spending thousands on new branded merchandise. During my first one-on-one with Ethan, he spent 15 minutes checking his phone before finally looking up. "Lila, I've been reviewing our technical assets," he said, leaning back in his chair. "The licensing system seems overly complicated. Clients are complaining about the hardware requirements. The system prevents piracy," I explained. "It's saved us millions in revenue protection." Thomas considered it one of our core competitive advantages. Ethan's smile didn't reach his eyes. Thomas had his approach. I have mine. "I'd like you to document everything about the system so we can evaluate simplification options." I complied, creating comprehensive documentation that explained every component of the licensing architecture. 2 weeks later, I discovered Ethan presenting his innovative licensing solution to potential investors, using my diagrams with my name removed. When I mentioned this to Amber over lunch, she warned me to be careful. "Madison's been asking strange questions about employee contracts," she confided, lowering her voice. "Specifically about intellectual property clauses and termination conditions." "For everyone or specific people?" I asked. Amber hesitated, mostly the early employees, especially anyone close to Thomas. My concern deepened when I was removed from key architecture meetings. Projects I had initiated were reassigned without explanation. New engineers were hired at senior levels and placed above me in the reporting structure, despite having less experience with our systems. During a company town hall, Madison unveiled a new organizational chart. My position had been moved from core engineering to a newly created legacy systems department, effectively sidelining me from any new development. The message was clear. I was being pushed out. Ryan confirmed my suspicions during a rare moment alone in the break room. "They've been asking me about backdoor access to the licensing system," he whispered, checking to make sure we weren't overheard. "Wanted to know if there were ways around the hardware authentication." That would completely compromise security, I said, alarmed. Did you tell them that? Ryan nodded grimly. They didn't seem concerned. Said something about business priorities trumping theoretical vulnerabilities. That evening, I stayed late, using my administrative access to review recent system changes. What I found chilled me. Someone had committed code modifications to the licensing system that created a subtle but significant change. When clients authenticated with our servers, additional data was being collected without their knowledge or consent. User information, usage patterns, and even snippets of processed data were being redirected to an unfamiliar server. This wasn't just a security issue. It was potentially illegal, violating both our user agreements and data protection laws. I documented the changes and planned to discuss them with Ethan the next morning. But when I arrived, my keycard was denied. The security guard called upstairs, then awkwardly informed me I needed to wait for HR. Jessica from Human Resources eventually escorted me to a conference room where Ethan and Madison were waiting, along with a man I didn't recognize. Lila, Ethan began without preamble, we're implementing some organizational changes. Unfortunately, your position has been eliminated. This is Alan from HR Operations, Madison added, gesturing to the stranger. He'll walk you through the separation process. I sat in stunned silence as Alan outlined my severance package, explaining I would receive 6 weeks of pay in exchange for signing a non-disclosure agreement and a non-disparagement clause. What about my equity? I finally managed to ask. As an early employee, I had substantial stock options that were now fully vested. Madison's perfectly manicured nails tapped the table. The documentation is being reviewed by legal. We'll be in touch about that separately. When I tried to bring up the unauthorized code changes, Ethan interrupted. We're not here to discuss technical matters. This is a straightforward business decision. Alan escorted me to my desk to collect personal belongings while a security guard hovered nearby. My colleagues stared at their screens, pretending not to notice. Only Peter, a fellow engineer, dared to approach as I was leaving. This was planned months ago, he whispered. They've been systematically pushing out Thomas's original team. 4 others already gone, now you. As I was hurried toward the exit, I realized something crucial. In the rush to remove me, no one had asked for my black security fob. The hardware signer that gave administrator access to our entire licensing system was still in my possession. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of rejection emails from potential employers. Despite my experience, every promising lead mysteriously dried up after reference checks. Industry connections suddenly became too busy to take my calls. The Silicon Valley network that had once seemed so welcoming now operated like a closed door. Sitting in my apartment surrounded by cardboard boxes, I forced myself to face reality. Madison and Ethan weren't just pushing me out, they were attempting to erase my professional existence. My phone chimed with a calendar reminder, the farewell coffee that HR had organized as a courtesy. The thought of standing around awkwardly while former colleagues made small talk made my stomach churn, but skipping it would only reinforce whatever narrative Madison and Ethan were spreading. I chose a simple black dress professional, but not trying too hard. As I got ready, I spotted my Veritech security fob on my nightstand. I almost left it behind, then slipped it into my pocket on instinct. 6 years of habit was hard to break. The office felt different as a visitor. The receptionist asked me to wait while she called upstairs, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. When the elevator finally arrived, I was escorted by a security guard to the 4th floor break room. About 15 people had shown up, mostly engineers from my former team and a few friends from other departments. Amber rushed over immediately, hugging me tightly. "This is complete garbage," she whispered. "Everyone knows it." Ryan joined us, his expression grim. "They've been telling people you were let go for performance issues. Nobody's buying it." Before I could respond, the room hushed as Madison entered, followed by Ethan and Jackson Weber, the company counsel. Madison's smile was camera-ready as she approached. "So glad you could make it," she said loudly, as though we were at a charity gala rather than my termination celebration. "We wanted to properly acknowledge your contributions." Her emphasis made it clear what she thought of those contributions. She gestured toward a coffee tray on a nearby table. "Would you mind? Be useful." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. I felt every eye on me as I moved to the tray, cheeks burning with humiliation. As I lifted it, the security fob slipped from my pocket and clattered to the floor. Jackson bent to pick it up, his legal training evident in his careful movements. He turned the small black device over in his hand, his expression changing as he noticed the embedded serial number and security markings. "Whose hardware signer is this?" he asked slowly, looking between me and Madison. "And why does her name unlock our license vault?" Madison's face went pale. Ethan stepped forward quickly. "Jackson, this isn't the time. This is an administrator-level security credential," Jackson continued, his lawyer's precision cutting through Ethan's interruption. "According to our security protocols, only 4 exist, and apparently Miss Bennett still has hers." The silence in the room was deafening. Several engineers exchanged glances, clearly understanding the significance. Madison's composure cracked visibly. "There's been a simple oversight in the exit process," Ethan said smoothly. "Lila, if you'll hand that over, we can conclude this gathering." I reached for the fob, then paused. "Actually, I'd like to discuss this with Jackson first, privately." Madison's eyes narrowed dangerously. "That won't be necessary." "The fob, please." "As company counsel," Jackson said carefully, "I'm concerned about a potential security breach. If Miss Bennett has maintained system access after termination, we need to understand why and how." "I didn't maintain access," I clarified. "Nobody asked for the fob when I was escorted out. Just like nobody discussed the code changes made to the licensing system before my termination changes that may violate user privacy laws." The room went completely still. Ethan's practiced smile vanished. "This farewell has concluded," Madison announced sharply. "Everyone back to work. Lila, Jackson, Ethan boardroom. Now." As people reluctantly filed out, several touched my arm or squeezed my shoulder in silent support. Amber met my eyes with a look that clearly said, "Be careful." The walk to the boardroom felt like a march to execution. Once inside, Madison didn't bother sitting down. "What exactly are you implying about code changes?" she demanded. "I'm not implying anything," I replied, finding unexpected strength in finally speaking the truth. "I'm stating that someone modified the licensing system to collect unauthorized user data. As the architect of that system, I'm legally obligated to report potential violations." "You signed an NDA," Ethan reminded me. "NDAs don't cover illegal activities," I countered. Jackson cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should discuss the technical details before making any legal assertions." "There's nothing to discuss," Madison snapped. "Lila is a disgruntled former employee making baseless accusations because she's upset about being terminated." "Then you won't mind if I verify her claims," Jackson replied. "As counsel, I need to assess any potential liability." Madison and Ethan exchanged a look I couldn't interpret. Finally, Ethan nodded tersely. "Fine. Jackson can review the system. In the meantime," he held out his hand, the security fob. I hesitated, then placed it in his palm. As his fingers closed around it, I felt the last connection to my work at Veritech slipping away. "We'll be in touch if we have questions," Madison said dismissively. "Security will escort you out." As I turned to leave, Jackson spoke up. "Actually, I'd like Lila's contact information. If I need to understand the original system architecture, it would be helpful to consult its creator." Madison looked like she wanted to object, but with Jackson watching, she simply nodded curtly. The security guard who escorted me to the lobby was apologetic. "For what it's worth," he said quietly as we reached the exit, "my brother works in tech, says your licensing system is brilliant." I managed a small smile. "Thank you." Walking away from the building, I felt oddly lighter despite everything. For the first time since my termination, I had spoken the truth out loud, and judging by the expressions I'd seen, I wasn't the only one who recognized it. 3 days after the farewell coffee disaster, I was organizing my home office when I uncovered a folder of licensing system notes I'd brought home during development. Nothing confidential, just my personal design thoughts and architectural considerations. But seeing them triggered a cascade of questions. Why had Madison and Ethan been so defensive about the code changes? Why keep Jackson, their own legal counsel, in the dark about system modifications? And why had no one in security flagged the unauthorized data collection? I opened my laptop and reviewed my notes, comparing them with the modifications I'd glimpsed before being terminated. The original system had been designed with privacy as a foundational principle. Client data was carefully segmented, with strict access controls and comprehensive audit logging. The changes I'd seen suggested someone had created a shadow pathway, siphoning data while bypassing the audit systems. It was sophisticated work, not something a casual hacker could accomplish. This required intimate knowledge of the system architecture. My phone rang, startling me. Unknown number. "Hello? Lila? It's Jackson Weber." I sat up straighter. "I didn't expect to hear from you so soon." "Neither did I," he replied, his voice carefully neutral. "I've reviewed the licensing system and have some questions. Would you be willing to meet? Off-site?" My pulse quickened. "Of course. When and where?" "There's a coffee shop called Treadwell's about 10 blocks from the office." 4 o'clock today? I'll be there." Treadwell's was a small, independent cafe tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop, far enough from Veritech to avoid running into employees. I arrived 15 minutes early, selecting a corner table with a view of the entrance. Jackson arrived precisely at 4, his usual tailored suit replaced by casual slacks and a button-down shirt. He ordered a black coffee before joining me. "Thank you for meeting," he began, his tone formal despite the setting. "What I'm about to discuss is sensitive." "I understand." He placed a tablet on the table between us, screen dark. I reviewed the licensing system code as thoroughly as my technical knowledge allows. There have indeed been modifications that weren't documented through proper channels. Validation sent a wave of relief through me. "What kind of modifications?" "That's where I need your expertise," he admitted. "The changes appear designed to collect and transmit certain data points, but I can't determine the scope or purpose." "Can I see?" He hesitated, then slid the tablet toward me. "This is highly irregular, but given the circumstances." The tablet contained screenshots of code segments rather than the actual repository, a smart legal precaution. I examined them carefully, the familiar architecture bringing a pang of nostalgia. What I saw confirmed my fears and revealed something worse. "This isn't just collecting usage data," I explained, pointing to key sections. "It's creating a backdoor into client systems. See here? When clients authenticate, this code injects a secondary access protocol that remains active even after normal sessions terminate. Jackson's expression darkened. That sounds like unauthorized access, I finished. Potentially criminal depending on what's done with it. Could this be some kind of security feature? Not one I designed or approved, I said firmly. And definitely not one documented in our client agreements. He rubbed his forehead. There's more. After you mentioned the hardware signer issue, I reviewed the security protocols. Your administrator access was never properly revoked. Neither was Ryan's when he was let go last week. Ryan's gone. The news hit me hard. When? 2 days after you. Along with 3 other security team members. The pattern was becoming clear. They're removing everyone who might recognize or question these changes. Jackson nodded grimly. I've also discovered some unusual corporate structuring. A subsidiary was formed 3 months ago under a holding company. Veritech transfers significant funds to this entity, but there's no clear business purpose documented. Who controls the subsidiary? Officially, it's owned by the holding company. Unofficially, he hesitated. Madison and Ethan are the only authorized signatories. My mind raced. Have you checked where the backdoor data is being sent? Jackson's expression confirmed he'd already connected the dots. The server belongs to the subsidiary. The implications were staggering. Madison and Ethan weren't just collecting unauthorized data, they were funneling it through a separate company they controlled. There's one more thing you should know, Jackson said, lowering his voice further. Veritech is preparing for an IPO. Filing paperwork will begin next month. Now everything made horrible sense. They were using the back door to access valuable client data, likely selling it through their separate company, while preparing to cash in with a public offering before anyone discovered the deception. This is securities fraud, I said. Not to mention computer crimes, privacy violations, and breach of contract. Jackson nodded slowly. The question is, what do we do about it? We need more evidence, I replied. Concrete proof of how the back door is being used and where the money's going. That won't be easy, he warned. Madison and Ethan are watching me closely now, and I'm not technical enough to gather the kind of evidence we'd need. I considered our options. What about the board? Thomas's old friends are still directors, right? Yes, but they've been fed a carefully curated narrative. Madison has them convinced the company needs aggressive, new direction to succeed. And the IPO? They see it as Thomas's ultimate vision fulfilled. I fell silent, contemplating the magnitude of the deception. Thomas had built Veritech on principles of integrity and value creation. His daughter was corrupting that legacy, using his life's work as a vehicle for fraud. I need to think, I finally said. We need a plan that won't be dismissed as the complaints of terminated employees. Jackson nodded. Be careful. They have resources and aren't afraid to use them. As we parted outside the cafe, a realization struck me. Jackson, why are you helping me? You're risking your position. He paused, his expression somber. I was Thomas's friend for 15 years before I was Veritech's lawyer. He deserves better than this. Walking home, I felt both energized and terrified. The truth was worse than I'd imagined, but at least now I knew I wasn't alone in wanting to expose it. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your email. Urgent. A. Amber. I quickened my pace, reaching my apartment in record time. The email had no subject line, just an attachment and a brief message. Found this while organizing legal archives. Thomas wanted you to have it. Delete after reading. The attachment was a scanned letter, dated 3 weeks before Thomas died. Dear Lila, it began in Thomas's distinctive handwriting. If you're reading this, I've either shared my concerns with you directly, or circumstances have made this letter necessary. I've observed troubling changes in Madison's approach to the business. Her partnership with Ethan Morris particularly concerns me. Their focus on extraction, rather than creation, runs counter to everything I've built. I've amended my will to include protective measures for the company, but legal mechanisms can only do so much. The soul of Veritech has always resided in people like you who understand that technology should empower, not exploit. If needed, your hardware signer provides access to the fundamental systems I built this company upon. Use it wisely, with trust and gratitude, Thomas. I read the letter 3 times, emotions swirling. Thomas had seen the threat coming but hadn't lived long enough to address it. Now the responsibility had passed to me along with the means to fulfill it. The hardware signer, the one Ethan had taken from me, but as the original system architect, I knew something they didn't. There was a backup procedure, an emergency override Thomas and I had built in case all physical signers were compromised. I just needed to figure out how to use it without alerting Madison and Ethan to what I was doing. The existence of Thomas's letter changed everything. What had been a personal injustice now felt like a sacred trust. Thomas had seen the threat to his company and had tried to protect it. Now that responsibility had fallen to me. But what exactly was I supposed to do? Going to the authorities might eventually bring justice, but the investigation would take months, during which Madison and Ethan could destroy evidence or even sell the company. By the time the truth emerged, Veritech might be hollowed out beyond recovery. The board seemed like the logical choice, but as Jackson had pointed out, they were firmly under Madison's influence. Without irrefutable proof, they'd likely dismiss my claims as the bitterness of a fired employee. I needed advice from someone with no stake in the situation. After considering my options, I called Professor Diane Winters, my former computer science mentor from university. Her ethical compass had always been my North Star when technical possibilities outpaced moral certainties. We met at her campus office the following afternoon. After hearing the full story, she sat back in her chair, fingers steepled beneath her chin. "You're in a classic ethical bind," she said finally. "The system you built is being weaponized against the very people it was designed to protect. So I have a responsibility to stop it," I concluded. "Yes, but how you stop it matters," she cautioned. "If you use the emergency override, you'd technically be accessing company systems without authorization. Even though I built those systems, ownership in corporate contexts isn't that simple," she explained. "The code you wrote as an employee belongs to Veritech, not to you personally." Her words stung, but I knew she was right. "So what are my options?" "You need institutional support," she advised. "The board, law enforcement, or regulatory agencies. Someone with the authority to act legitimately. But without proof, they won't listen," I argued. "And to get proof, I need access to the systems." Professor Winters considered this. "What about whistleblower protections? Have you explored that avenue?" I hadn't, but the suggestion offered a potential path forward. After leaving campus, I spent the evening researching whistleblower laws and the Securities and Exchange Commission's whistleblower program. The protections were significant, especially with an IPO looming, but still required substantial evidence. The next morning, I tried a different approach. Using a secure email service, I sent an anonymous message to each board member, outlining my concerns about data privacy violations and potential securities fraud. I was careful to include just enough technical detail to establish credibility without revealing my identity. 2 days passed with no response. Then Amber called. Madison called an emergency board meeting yesterday, she told me. They're dismissing the anonymous allegations as technically inaccurate claims from disgruntled former employees. She's convinced them it's just people upset about the recent restructuring. Did anyone question her explanation? Walter Campbell asked for an independent security audit, Amber said, referring to one of the oldest board members and Thomas's former business partner. Madison agreed, but she's selecting the auditing firm. 3 guesses who they'll report to. My heart sank. So they'll find exactly what she wants them to find. Exactly. And there's more. The IPO timeline has been accelerated. They're pushing to file within 2 weeks. The news felt like a physical blow. Once the IPO process began, the deception would be much harder to uncover without causing massive collateral damage to employees, clients, and investors. I need to talk to Ryan, I decided. If anyone can help navigate the technical challenges, it's him. Finding Ryan proved surprisingly difficult. His phone went straight to voicemail. His social media accounts had been dormant since his termination, and mutual acquaintances hadn't heard from him. Finally, I resorted to waiting outside his apartment building. When he finally appeared that evening, he looked haggard, with dark circles under his eyes and rumpled clothes. Lila? His surprise quickly morphed into wariness. We shouldn't be seen together. 5 minutes, I pleaded. That's all I need. He hesitated, then gestured toward a nearby park. Once seated on a bench with reasonable privacy, he spoke in a low voice. They're monitoring my online activity and phone. My severance is contingent on ongoing cooperation, which basically means staying silent. About the licensing system changes? He nodded grimly. I confronted Ethan about the back door after you left. He claimed it was a business intelligence feature, approved at the highest levels. It's illegal, I said flatly. I know that. You know that. But they've created a paper trail showing it was properly approved. Any objections I raised were conveniently documented as performance issues. Ryan, they're using the back door to steal client data, and they've created a separate company to monetize it. His eyes widened slightly. That explains the unusual server configurations. The data was being routed through an external relay I couldn't fully trace. I need your help, I admitted. Thomas left me a letter indicating he trusted me to protect the company if necessary. He mentioned the hardware signer specifically. Ryan's expression darkened. They took yours. Mine too. But we built an emergency override, I reminded him, for catastrophic situations where all physical signers were compromised. The nuclear option, he murmured, using our old nickname for the procedure. That would give us administrator access to the entire system. Enough to gather concrete evidence of what they're doing? He nodded slowly. More than enough. But Lila, using that override, it's a massive risk. If they detect the access, they could claim we were hacking the system. Which is why I need your help to do it right, I said. We go in, gather the evidence, and get out clean and undetected. Ryan was silent for a long moment. What would we do with the evidence? Take it to Jackson, then to the board, and the SEC if necessary. With irrefutable proof, they can't ignore it. He rubbed his face tiredly. The right thing to do is obvious, but they've already shown they're willing to destroy careers to protect their scheme. I know it's asking a lot, I acknowledged, but this is bigger than our jobs now. It's about everyone who trusted Thomas's vision. His shoulders straightened almost imperceptibly. Thomas gave me my first real opportunity in tech when no one else would take a chance on me. I can't let them corrupt his legacy. Relief flooded through me. So you'll help? Yes. But we do this my way with every security precaution possible. We spent the next 3 days planning meticulously. Ryan created a secure communication channel through an encrypted messaging app. I gathered all my original design documents and notes on the licensing system. Together, we constructed a careful approach that would minimize our digital footprint while maximizing our ability to collect evidence. On the 4th day, I received an alarming call from Amber. "They're announcing the IPO tomorrow," she said without preamble. "Madison's called a press conference. Once it's public, there's no turning back." "We need more time," I protested. "There isn't any. And Lila, the technical documentation they're using for the filing, it has your name on it. They're using your original system architecture to give legitimacy to what they've built." A cold anger settled in my chest. They weren't just stealing from clients and investors, they were using my reputation to facilitate their fraud. "Tonight," I told Ryan when I called him. "We have to do it tonight." He didn't argue. "My place, 8 o'clock. Bring everything you have." As I gathered my notes and prepared to leave, my phone rang again. Jackson Weber. "Madison's asked me to prepare the final legal documentation for the IPO announcement," he said without greeting. "I can delay until morning at most." "We're moving tonight," I told him. "If we find what I think we will, can you get it to the board immediately?" Walter Campbell would listen, Jackson confirmed. "But the evidence would need to be overwhelming." "It will be," I promised. "Be ready for my call." As I hung up, I felt the weight of what we were about to do. This wasn't just about reclaiming my reputation, or even honoring Thomas's wishes. It was about preventing a massive fraud that would hurt countless people who trusted Veritech with their data and their investments. The stakes couldn't be higher, and we had exactly one chance to get it right. Ryan's apartment was transformed into a makeshift command center. 2 laptops sat on his dining table, alongside networking equipment I didn't recognize. Blackout curtains covered the windows, and a white noise machine hummed near the door. "Paranoid?" I asked, setting down my bag. "Prudent," he corrected. "We're about to access systems owned by people who've already demonstrated they don't play by the rules." He walked me through his security precautions. A virtual private network routing our connection through multiple countries, specialized software to mask our digital signatures, and a timer to ensure we didn't stay connected longer than necessary. "The emergency override requires both of us," he reminded me. "Your system architecture knowledge and my security credentials." I nodded, opening my notebook to the relevant page. "The override has 3 components: the architectural passphrase, the security operator confirmation, and the timeout window. Exactly 20 minutes, Ryan confirmed. After that, the system automatically logs any administrative actions to the security audit trail. Then we work fast. We positioned ourselves at opposite laptops and began. The override procedure was complex by design, requiring precise coordination between us. As the original architect, I had to enter specific commands in a particular sequence, while Ryan simultaneously provided security validations from his end. After 15 tense minutes, a simple message appeared on both our screens. "Administrator access granted." "We're in," Ryan said quietly. "Clock starts now." We worked with practiced efficiency, targeting the specific system areas where evidence of the backdoor and data exfiltration would be stored. Ryan focused on the network logs, showing where data was being sent, while I examined the code modifications that enabled the unauthorized access. The evidence was damning and comprehensive. Not only had they created a sophisticated backdoor into client systems, but they had also implemented automated processes to extract valuable proprietary information, customer data, and business intelligence. All of it was being routed to servers owned by their shell company, aptly named Right Analytics. "Look at this," Ryan said, turning his screen toward me. "They're packaging the stolen data by industry sector and selling it to competitors. There's a complete pricing schedule and client list. And here's the modification timeline," I added, pointing to my own screen. "The changes began exactly 2 weeks after Thomas died. They were planning this while attending his funeral. We documented everything methodically, saving screenshots, copying logs, and recording system timestamps. With 5 minutes remaining on our override window, we gathered the final pieces of evidence: financial transactions showing payments from competitors to Right Analytics, and from Right Analytics to offshore accounts controlled by Madison and Ethan. "That's it," Ryan said, initiating the shutdown sequence. "We need to disconnect before the timeout." As our access terminated and the override closed, we sat back and looked at each other. The evidence was overwhelming and deeply disturbing. "They've stolen millions in data," Ryan said quietly, "and compromised the security of every Veritech client." I nodded grimly. "And they were about to use the IPO to cash out before anyone discovered what they'd done." I called Jackson immediately, keeping details vague in case the line wasn't secure. "We have everything. Can you arrange a meeting?" "Walter Campbell has agreed to see us," he replied. "His home office, 7 a.m. tomorrow. He hasn't told the other board members." "We'll be there." Ryan and I spent the next several hours organizing the evidence into a clear, compelling presentation that even non-technical board members could understand. By dawn, we had a comprehensive document showing exactly what Madison and Ethan had done, how they had done it, and how much they had profited from their scheme. Walter Campbell's home was an understated colonial in an old-money neighborhood. His housekeeper showed us to a wood-paneled study, where Jackson was already waiting with Walter, a silver-haired man in his 60s, who had been Thomas's friend and business partner for decades. "Miss Bennett," Walter greeted me with a firm handshake. "Thomas spoke highly of you. Said you were the most principled engineer he'd ever hired." "Thank you, sir. I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "As do I. Jackson has briefed me on your concerns. I must say, they seem extraordinary." "They are," I acknowledged, "which is why we've brought evidence rather than allegations." For the next hour, Ryan and I walked Walter through everything we had discovered, from the backdoor code to the shell company financials. Jackson provided legal context, explaining the potential criminal and civil liabilities involved. Walter listened in silence, his expression growing increasingly grave. When we finished, he closed the folder containing our evidence and stood. "I've known Madison since she was born," he said quietly. "Thomas was concerned about her judgment, but this," he shook his head, "this is betrayal on a scale I never imagined." "The IPO announcement is scheduled for noon today," Jackson reminded him. Walter nodded. "Then we have work to do. I'll call an emergency board meeting for 9 a.m. Jackson, prepare a summary of potential legal exposures. Miss Bennett, Mr. Delaney, I'll need you both there to explain the technical aspects. Madison and Ethan will try to discredit us," I warned. "Let them try," Walter said grimly. "Numbers don't lie, and neither does code." The Veritech boardroom was tense when we arrived. 8 board members sat around the massive oak table, expressions ranging from curious to concerned. Jackson had arranged security to escort us directly to the meeting, bypassing Madison's office. We had just finished setting up our presentation when the door opened and Madison entered with Ethan close behind. She stopped short when she saw me and Ryan. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, looking at Walter. "An emergency board meeting," he replied calmly. "Please, take your seats. If this is about those anonymous allegations we've already addressed, this is about evidence of criminal activity," Walter cut in, his voice hardening. "Evidence the board needs to review before any IPO announcement." Madison's composure slipped momentarily before she recovered. "This is ridiculous. You've allowed disgruntled former employees to—" "Miss Wright," the board secretary interrupted. "Mr. Campbell has called this meeting in accordance with our bylaws. Please be seated, or you will be asked to leave." For a moment, I thought Madison might storm out. Instead, she took a seat at the far end of the table, Ethan beside her. The look she gave me promised retribution. Walter nodded for me to begin. I took a deep breath and started our presentation, explaining in clear terms how the licensing system had been modified to create unauthorized access to client systems. Ryan followed with details of the data exfiltration and the server connections to Wright Analytics. As we presented, I could see the board members' expressions changing from skepticism to concern to outright alarm. When Jackson outlined the legal implications, including potential criminal charges for wire fraud, computer crimes, and securities violations, the room fell completely silent. Madison finally erupted. "This is absurd. They illegally accessed company systems to fabricate this so-called evidence. They should be arrested, not listened to. The emergency override we used was built into the system from its inception," I explained calmly. "It exists specifically for situations where the normal security protocols have been compromised." "A convenient excuse for corporate espionage," Ethan interjected. "Actually," Jackson said, sliding a document across the table, "I have here Thomas Wright's original system specification, which explicitly includes the emergency override feature. And this," he added, producing another document, "is a letter Thomas wrote before his death, expressing concerns about potential misuse of company resources." Madison's face drained of color as she recognized her father's handwriting. "The question before this board is simple," Walter continued. "Given this evidence, can we in good conscience proceed with an IPO announcement today? And more fundamentally, should Madison Wright and Ethan Morris continue to lead this company?" The board's general counsel, who had been taking notes throughout, looked up. "I recommend we immediately postpone any IPO plans and launch a full independent investigation. The potential liabilities here are enormous." "I concur," said another board member, a venture capitalist who had funded Veritech's early rounds. "If even half of this is accurate, we're looking at existential risk to the company." "This is a coup," Madison declared, standing abruptly, "orchestrated by people who couldn't keep up with the company's evolution. When the investigation shows these allegations are meritless, I'll expect resignations from everyone involved in this farce." "Including your father?" I asked quietly, holding up my copy of Thomas's letter. "He saw what you were becoming, Madison. He tried to prevent exactly this." Something flickered in her eyes, pain, guilt, or perhaps just calculation. Before she could respond, the boardroom door opened and 2 men in suits entered. "Excuse the interruption," Walter said. "Given the severity of the allegations, I took the liberty of asking representatives from the SEC's Enforcement Division to join us. They'll ensure all evidence is properly preserved while the board determines next steps." Madison's face went from pale to ashen. Beside her, Ethan began whispering urgently in her ear. "The board will recess for 30 minutes to deliberate," Walter announced. "Miss Bennett, Mr. Delaney, thank you for your courage in bringing this forward. You're welcome to wait in the adjacent conference room. As we filed out, I passed close to Madison. Your father built something that mattered, I said softly. Something that helped people. That could have been your legacy, too. Her eyes met mine, and for just a moment, I glimpsed something like regret before her expression hardened again. In the conference room, Ryan, Jackson, and I waited in tense silence. After what seemed like hours, Walter appeared at the door. The board has voted unanimously to remove Madison Wright and Ethan Morris from all positions within Veritech, effective immediately, he announced. We've also initiated a full forensic investigation and notified all relevant authorities. The IPO is indefinitely postponed. Relief flooded through me. What happens to the company now? That, Walter said, is something the board hopes to discuss with both of you. The next 6 weeks were among the most intense of my life. The board appointed Walter Campbell as interim CEO while a full investigation unfolded. Ryan and I were brought back as special advisors, tasked with understanding the full scope of the technical compromises and developing a remediation plan. What we discovered was both worse and better than expected. Madison and Ethan's scheme had been extensive, compromising data from over 200 clients. However, the actual damage was limited by the security measures built into the original system design. My insistence on data compartmentalization had prevented them from accessing the most sensitive client information. The investigation also revealed that most employees had been completely unaware of the illegal activities. A small group of newly hired engineers had implemented the changes under direct orders from Ethan, told they were creating competitive intelligence features. When the truth emerged, these engineers were horrified and cooperated fully with investigators. Madison and Ethan faced multiple federal charges, including wire fraud, computer fraud, and securities violations. Their assets were frozen, and the money trail led to offshore accounts containing millions in ill-gotten gains. The legal proceedings promised to be lengthy, but Jackson assured us the evidence was overwhelming. 3 weeks into the crisis, Walter called me into his office. The board has made a decision about the company's future leadership, he said without preamble. We'd like you to become Chief Technology Officer, with Ryan as Chief Security Officer. The offer caught me completely off guard. Me? CTO? Walter nodded. Thomas always said you understood the soul of what Veritech should be. We need that vision now more than ever. What about the CEO position? We're promoting Amanda Chen from operations, he replied. She's been with the company almost as long as you and has the management experience we need. Together, we believe you can rebuild what Madison and Ethan nearly destroyed. I asked for 24 hours to consider the offer, though in my heart I already knew my answer. That evening, I visited Thomas's grave with a small bunch of wildflowers, the kind he used to keep in mason jars around the original office. I wish you could have seen how it all turned out, I said quietly to the granite headstone. Your backup plan worked. The company is safe. The next day, I accepted the CTO position. My first official act was to establish a comprehensive ethics framework for all technology development at Veritech, embedding Thomas's values into formal policies. My second was to create a whistleblower protection program that would ensure no one ever feared speaking up about potential wrongdoing. Over the following months, we worked to rebuild trust with clients, many of whom had been horrified to learn about the data breaches. Amanda proved to be an exceptional CEO, combining strategic vision with genuine concern for employees and customers alike. Ryan revolutionized our security practices, implementing safeguards that became industry benchmarks. Most remarkably, the crisis ultimately strengthened the company. Our transparent handling of the situation and commitment to making things right earned us respect throughout the industry. By the 1-year anniversary of that fateful farewell coffee, Veritech had recovered all lost clients and added dozens of new ones. On that anniversary, we gathered for a different kind of company meeting. The original warehouse where Thomas had started the company had been renovated into our new innovation lab. Standing at the front of the assembled employees, many of whom had weathered the crisis alongside us, I felt a profound sense of completion. 1 year ago, this company stood at a crossroads, I began. The easier path would have been to stay silent, to look the other way, to prioritize personal comfort over collective integrity. But that's not what Thomas Wright built this company to be. I gestured to the plaque we were unveiling, bearing Thomas's portrait and his favorite quote, "Technology without ethics is just sophisticated mischief." Today, we recommit ourselves to the vision that started Veritech. We build tools that empower, not exploit. We succeed by creating value, not extracting it. And we never forget that behind every data point is a person deserving of respect. The applause that followed wasn't just for my words, or even for Thomas's memory. It was for the collective journey we had taken together, from crisis to redemption, from betrayal to renewal. Later that evening, at a smaller gathering for the original team members, Amber raised her glass in a toast. "To Lila," she said, who dropped a fob and imploded a conspiracy. Everyone laughed, but Ryan added seriously, "and rebuilt a company in the process." As we celebrated long into the night, I reflected on everything that had transpired. The journey had been painful and frightening, but necessary. Sometimes it takes a crisis to reveal what truly matters and who truly stands for those values. The most important lesson I learned through it all was that integrity isn't just a personal virtue, it's a collective responsibility. When systems fail or leaders lose their way, it falls to individuals to make difficult choices, to stand for what's right even when it comes at personal cost. Thomas had understood this. He built that understanding into the very architecture of his company and into the people he chose to build it with. His legacy wasn't just a successful business. It was a community of people who cared enough to protect what he had created. In the end, that made all the difference. What would you do if you discovered unethical practices at your workplace? Would you have the courage to speak up, even if it meant risking your job or reputation? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might find inspiration in standing up for what's right. Thank you for listening to my journey. May you find the strength to honor your own values, whatever challenges you face.